When we think of the most influential blockbusters of all time, a bunch of films come to mind. Jaws, Star Wars, The Matrix, Avatar, The Avengers. All of these films were game changers. Their arrival on the film scene warped everything around them, and their impact can still be felt in the media we see today. However, there's one movie that belongs on this list, yet for too long has been denied its importance to blockbuster history. And that's, of course, Michael Bay's Transformers. Nowadays, to be a hit, a movie needs one of two things to succeed. One, it needs to be based on a beloved fan property, and two, it needs to offer an experience worthy of the big screen. Other films in the past used this as a starting point, but Transformers was truly the first film to hone in on these two elements specifically. It perfected the craft of getting people into their seats, and then f***ed up pretty much everything else. Michael Bay is now seen as an offbeat auteur trying to save 90s action films with modern toys. But during the peak of his career, he was seen as everything wrong with modern filmmaking. Transformers is now 15 years old, and in an era of big dumb movies, it spawned the biggest and dumbest movies. There's a saying about action films, that dialogue scenes are the scenes you need to endure to get to the action. I don't think any series embodies that quote more than the Bayformers. These films are crass, juvenile, deeply cynical, on top of being overtly racist and sexist.
Read? We don't really do much reading.
And yet, these films were seen en masse and built a massive fan base. These movies weren't just big, they were the most successful films of their years. These films were criticized and mocked, yet they engaged their audience in new ways and set the stage for our modern blockbusters. If we had to endure these scenes to get to the spectacle, then there must have been something extraordinary about this spectacle. This is how Michael Bay transformed blockbuster filmmaking. Alright, so here's the part of the video where I not only explain that Michael Bay was the perfect fit for this franchise, but also that the first Transformers is one of the best directed blockbusters of all time. What? Now, if we're going to talk about the directing, we of course have to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the Bay. I can't explain his entire filmography, so instead I'll link below the works of Lindsay Ellis, Patrick Willems, and Tony Joe, who've all made wonderful videos breaking down this man's fascinating career. In short, Michael Bay's mantra is to emphasize the impact or edit of a shot over literally every single part of the narrative. In his films, the stories, characters, plot consistency, and basic continuity can and will be sacrificed to make a shot look dope. His filmmaking is an extreme escalation of existing filmmaking techniques. Yes, other films have dynamic camera moves and big explosions, but they are usually in the context of scenes with tension, geographical understanding, and character motivation. Instead of building to a satisfying escape from destruction, Michael Bay rides this wave of destruction, relying on the pure kinetic energy of rapid-fire editing and firework pyrotechnics to entertain the audience. By lacking the geographical understanding and stakes of, say, an Indiana Jones set piece, the audience can't engage with the characters and anticipating the action. Instead, we become submitted to it, reacting to every flash and bang with no real idea what's going on or how to end it. Instead of clarity, we get chaos. Which is exactly why Transformers works. Because for once, Bay's techniques actually fit the story. In action films, it is the goal of the filmmaker to put the audience in the role of the action hero. We want to feel what they feel, see what they see, and believe that we are performing these amazing feats of heroism. But in Transformers, Michael Bay doesn't want us to feel like Optimus Prime or Bumblebee. He wants us in the shoes of Sam Witwicky. So whereas most action films put us in the perspective of the hero driving the action, Bay puts us squarely in the passenger seat, absorbing the glorious action happening right in front of us. In order to have every shot of the Transformers feel huge, we have to predominantly see the action from a human perspective. Whenever possible, Bay uses low angles and parallax to emphasize the size and weight of his action. Bay will also purposely obfuscate and hide the spectacle to preserve this feeling. Here's an action beat from Revenge of the Fallen that perfectly embodies Michael Bay's filmmaking. So in this scene, Optimus Prime is defending Sam from the Decepticons. Much of the action is shot through the trees, which not only puts us in Sam's point of view, but also creates parallax and emphasizes the size of these robots. In shot 1, we see Optimus swing this tree trunk overhead at Megatron, and in shot 2, we see a log come close to hitting Sam while he takes cover behind a tree. The continuity and connection between these shots doesn't really track. The direction of the log is different in both shots. We don't see where Sam is in relation to Optimus, and why would Optimus be swinging this log in the direction of Sam? These two shots don't convey a coherent action beat. And yet, in a way, this disorientation adds to the terror Sam is feeling. It's as though danger is coming from every direction, which is the point of this scene. And the flow between these two shots is just so good. This flow is what carries us through the spectacle. This technique of shooting around the Transformers, of shooting the action from a human perspective to preserve this sense of danger, certainly sounds familiar. Steven Spielberg was of course an executive producer on these films and has often been credited for being instrumental to the first film's success. This could be seen in Bay's bored use of the Spielberg face and the strong connection between Sam and his new alien friend. But where I see Spielberg's influence the most is in how Bay frames his Transformers, using the same rules for awe and wonder, and then distorting them to create terror. If you put shots from Transformers back to back with shots from Jurassic Park, it's hard not to see the influence. The opening scene where Blackout attacks the military base never shows us his full design, instead giving us snippets and pieces to let the audience piece together. Much like the opening of Jurassic Park. The film utilizes a lot of horror filmmaking, especially early on as the soldiers are terrorized by the initial Decepticons. But where the filmmaking really gets interesting is when this technique transforms into Bay's signature style. Because the size of the Transformers must always be emphasized, you'll rarely see the entire robot in a fight. They are almost always framed through the environment, debris, smoke, other characters, or even the frame itself leaving out significant parts of the action. The flow is emphasized more than the choreography, with individual moves being highlighted over the overall shape of the fight. Then for any significant contact or just a cool pose, Bay will whip out a slow-mo and boy does he love his slow-mo. So with all these techniques outlined, let's see how Bay creates an engaging action scene with the best scene from the first film. Right out of the gate, this scene starts with incredible energy. The camera begins by following Bone Crusher, but then goes through him while he transforms, an effect that's equally exciting and disorienting. With these shots, Bay is playing with our perception of what is and isn't a visual effect shot. We think we're watching real cars driving until we're not. Now this is just incredible. The only thing fake about this shot is Bone Crusher, and I particularly like this camera angle mounted to the side of the bus. Any significant contact, we go to slow-mo, and you'll notice how this tackle moves out of frame. These mistakes sell the moment and give it a human touch. Now here's where the fight really gets interesting. In Jurassic Park fashion, the entire next part of this fight is shot through this family's car, and watch how Bay uses this vehicle to perfectly frame his shots. We see Bone Crusher fall through the sunroof and land through the front windshield. We see Optimus get hit at this angle, and then he delivers a harder blow back through the sunroof. Again, more slow-mo. The action then leaves the frame through the side window, which sets us up for a gag.
Cool, Mom!
Finally, we finish the fight under the overpass. Despite no human characters, the fight is still shot from a low angle. Optimus' sword pops into frame and effectively ends the duel, with Bone Crusher's severed head dropping into frame. Like the best action scenes, this battle quits while it's ahead. In fact, all the best Transformers action scenes come in around the 2-minute mark. The last thing going for Transformers that elevates the spectacle is that there are real story payoffs that occur during the action. Michaela is ashamed of helping her dad steal cars as a kid, but then she uses his skill to help Bumblebee rejoin the fight. After their first defeat against Blackout, the soldiers get a second chance to fight him, and they take him out in a really satisfying manner. Even Sam, after spending the entire film as a coward, stands his ground against Megatron. Bay keeps us in our humans' perspective for the entire third act battle, and lets them come into their own as action heroes. The thing that really elevates Michael Bay's direction is his restraint. Whether it came from Spielberg or his own accord, there was a real effort to tone down Bay's more excessive tendencies. When I say restraint, I mean the fact that Bay uses quite a few practical robots, or how the Decepticons express themselves in their vehicle forms before they transform, or how the film takes the time to build up to Megatron and save him for the third act. In this film, Bay had more than just his usual bag of tricks up his sleeve, so once the story had done the work, he could unleash his fireworks to an effect they've never fully reached before. When used to elevate story and character, there's nothing better than a little bit of Bayhem. But if the lesson of the first film was the importance of restraint, that's certainly not the lesson Michael Bay took away for his next project.
One man alone, betrayed by the country he loves, now its last hope.
Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is the cinematic equivalent of a manic episode. This thing doesn't mess around. Within any minute of screen time, we'll go from a Transformer shooting bullets from its groin, to two dogs humping in a cutaway, to another Transformer farting fire. I mean, at that point you just gotta respect it. I can't emphasize enough how many choices are made in this movie. We've sort of forgotten how aggressively terrible this thing is. Give it a rewatch, you're bound to feel something. Now would be a good time to mention the behind-the-scenes drama happening during this film's production. You had a lead actor who was self-destructing, both mentally and physically, which manifested itself on screen. However, the biggest problem this film faced was that it didn't have a script. Because this film was made during the writer's strike of '08, screenwriters Aaron Kruger, Alex Kurtzman, and Robert Orsi had only 3 weeks to write up a treatment, leaving Michael Bay to essentially wing it. He had to film large-scale battles without any clear goals or narrative through-line. This makes Revenge of the Fallen an interesting case study. It is essentially Bay being gifted a limitless budget to indulge in his worst impulses, and indulge he did.
Name's Willie. Yeah, say my name, say my name.
Outside the story scenes, which are just dreadful, it's interesting to see how this lack of structure affected Bay's action filmmaking. A good place to start is the film's climax, the most important moment of filmmaking within any narrative. The idea behind this fight is that a revived Optimus Prime has to defeat the Fallen and Megatron before their pyramid device destroys the sun. There's a lot of ways this showdown can go down. Perhaps the Autobots can rally to help Optimus save the day. Or maybe Optimus could distract the Decepticons while the humans spring to action and take out this device in a nail-biting sequence. Instead, Optimus just flies there and blows the thing up in one shot. He then spends the next minute just utterly massacring these two.
Give me your face.
Oh my god. Give me your face. This fight perfectly encapsulates the issues that plague the Transformers franchise from here on out. First off, this fight is absolutely incomprehensible. With no human presence to ground us, Bay's framing goes completely out the window. And second, this action scene marks the shift towards spectacle that glamorizes its heroes and revels in the destruction of its villains. Without the character-driven, Allspark-centered action of the first film, this final battle devolves into a sea of nothingness. Despite all the tricks Bay whips out, from the military beauty shots, the comedic slapstick, and the massive explosions, none of it makes any impact as none of the elements come together in an interesting way. It's just a series of isolated glory shots, barely held together by an incredibly static battle that never develops. It's not just bad action, it's wasted action. Take the introduction of Devastator, one of the most complicated visual effects in film history. This Decepticon was one of the major selling points in the trailers. He was the big effect, and his initial transformation is certainly impressive. But what do the filmmakers do once he's made his grand entrance? Well, they give him a comedic fight with the twins that goes nowhere. Then he serves his function in the plot to expose the Doomsday Pyramid thingy, all while in the background of Agent Simmons' shenanigans.
I am directly below the enemy scrotum.
Finally, he is taken out with the most contrived human transformer weapon that is never established or referenced again. This right here is the definition of anticlimactic. Transformers 2 has a greater problem overall of introducing moments or concepts to solve story problems that have far greater implications on the film's universe. I mean, you could do a whole video on this Terminator Transformer girl. There's so much to read into. But that's not the point. The point is to have every shot elicit some response from the audience, and ultimately, make the Transformers look cool.
Damn, I'm good.
This is why the Force fight particularly stands out within this movie, because it's the only action scene that operates like a real movie. There are stakes, a grounded human perspective, the odds are stacked against Optimus, and we spend most of the fight seeing him get his ass kicked. There's a real build-up to him letting loose, with choreography that is actually followable, and it ends on consequences that impact the story. Scenes like this show that it is not impossible for Michael Bay to film impactful action scenes that serve the narrative. He absolutely can. Instead, Revenge of the Fallen shows us that he simply chooses not to.
Shit just got real.
Michael Bay and his team at Paramount knew they had something to prove with this third film. By their own admission, Revenge of the Fallen was a piece of crap. So how do they respond to their critics? Well, they fired back by creating one of the most influential third acts in blockbuster history. The emphasis here is on the third act part, as the rest of the film suffers from a lot of the same issues that plagued Revenge of the Fallen. But this hour-long third act battle is Michael Bay's Fury Road, a pure exercise of Bay pushing his action filmmaking skills to the fullest. With this final battle, there were two key decisions that really paid off. For one, Bay moved back with his camera and finally gave us action in wide shots. This was done to accommodate for the new 3D technology, while also making his action far more legible. And two, he cut down on the tone-deaf comic relief, fully entrusting in his action spectacle. Now, I mentioned before that the key to the first film's action is how it effectively puts the humans in the passenger seat to observe the robot carnage. But this action climax is really about these humans holding their own against the Decepticons. I know there's a conflict between Optimus and Sentinel that's supposed to be important or something, but who cares when the humans are doing stuff like this? Focusing on the humans not only gives us clear underdogs to root for, but also taps into the horror destruction filmmaking that made the first film so effective. The two standout sequences are clearly the flying squirrel jump and Shockwave toppling the skyscraper. Not only do they stand out for their phenomenal flow and editing, but in an era where spectacle has become increasingly digital, partly due to this series' success, these sequences stand out as champions of practical effects. These stunt actors really did fly through the skyscrapers of Chicago, and for the skyscraper toppling sequence, Michael Bay went out of his way to build a rig that would one-up Inception. Part of what adds to the danger of these scenes is that they didn't look entirely safe to film, and if we celebrate the Mission Impossible films for doing their stunts for real, then I believe we owe it to Bay to celebrate this craft. This trilogy, and especially Dark of the Moon, sit on the nexus of where our blockbusters have split. On one end, you have people pushing this sort of pure action, less cuts, less digidoubles, something real. And on the other hand, you have a pure embrace of digital technology. We know these camera moves and actors are fake, but we enjoy anyway. Of course, I'm generalizing. Marvel films have real stunts, and even Dark of the Moon gets absurd. but still these films have different goals when it comes to their action. If I could sum up why these films were successful into one point, it would be that Michael Bay was obsessed with making his action feel real. Obviously, ILM's groundbreaking Transformers models had something to do with this, but it goes well beyond how photoreal the robots looked. It's the integration of the CG into the live action, fake robots causing real chaos around the actors. When grounded through their perspective, shooting through real environments with thoughtful framing and pacing, it creates a truly immersive feeling. This is why Dark of the Moon's final battle provides the ultimate Bayformers experience. Chicago was the perfect playground for Bay to play with scale and geography. Seeing the humans go toe-to-toe with the Decepticons is legitimately thrilling, and he earns those bursts of action where Optimus Prime and Bumblebee gloriously save the day. If the rest of the Transformers films were as good as this final battle, I think we would be a lot kinder on these movies. Building upon the previous two films, Dark of the Moon set the stage for what we would expect from our blockbusters. So, what happened? How did these films lose their dominance in the blockbuster scene? Well, the answer is honestly rather simple. When it comes to spectacle, there's always room for escalation. Once the trilogy had wrapped, other blockbusters were providing action scenes on a similar scale, meaning Transformers had lost its commercial edge. Instead of getting more creative, they just became longer, which completely went against what made the spectacle fun in the first place. But there's another problem that doomed this series' fate, and it's even apparent in Dark of the Moon's behemoth final battle, and that's the disregard for character. I know, it sounds silly to talk about character in these movies, I mean, come on. But going back to the first film's success, there was a strong effort in centering the action around the characters. Not only was this used to make the spectacle as impactful as possible, but it also allowed for real character payoffs that mattered to the story. Dark of the Moon has a similarly structured climax. Optimus fights the boss Transformer, while Sam deals with the Doomsday device. But the staging here is used to far less dramatic effect. In Transformers, Sam was front and center in the action and ultimately gets to make the key play, but this time he's off in a completely separate arena. Instead of seeing the action from someone we care about, we see it from a faceless soldier. Sam has this whole arc about how he's not a hero, he's just the messenger.
You're a messenger. You've always been a messenger.
But it doesn't pay off in any significant way. He just repeats the line as he kills McDreamy.
No, I'm just a messenger.
This next moment is perhaps the most revealing one in the film. When Sam is supposed to do something, to finally step up and stop the pillars, he just stands there like an idiot. Everything we followed him through to get to this point is wasted, as the pillar is taken out in such a convenient and contrived manner. Perhaps a better example is the use of Carly, quite literally Michaela's replacement. Instead of involving herself in the action just happens around her in comical fashion, though she does call Megatron a bitch, which causes him to turn on Sentinel, and, well, that's really grasping at straws as far as setups and payoffs go. In the end, the humans were only here to frame the Transformers' action, and nothing more. These Transformers films make a great comparison to the Avengers films, its successor in large-scale blockbuster filmmaking. While they are incredibly similar in visuals, scale, and audience, they are night and day when it comes to their use of their characters. Through every single epic battle, these character arcs drive the spectacle and create payoffs a decade in the making. Transformers can never do this because it trades in characters the way a car owner trades in models, constantly looking to show off their new toys while sending their junk to the scrapyard. And while it's easy to mock these films and criticize where they went wrong, I keep looking back to the promise of the first film, seeing the joy and wonder and wondering what could have been. That is enough Michael Bay's Transformers for one lifetime. But not enough of Films and Stuff. We are back. A new video next week. This is the summer of Films and Stuff. As always, follow me on social media, subscribe, watch a video right here. Unlike Michael Bay, I'm not going to waste your time. Goodbye.